Hello and welcome to another short mini lecture for your economics course. This particular video lecture is not going to be one where you're going to see me. Instead, you're just going to hear me and see this black screen in front of you because I'm going to illustrate the supply and demand curves and what factors, outside factors, can change them one way or the other. Now, in chapter 3 of your book, you're going to learn about supply and demand, and essentially what it is a way to illustrate markets, a way to graphically show what happens in markets. And anytime you have a market, you have both a buyer and seller. I'm going to go ahead and write that up here. Have an idea of what we're talking about. You have at least a buyer and a seller. In other words, you have a consumer. And I apologize for my bad handwriting. I know that's going to get worse when I start drawing the graphs. I'm just not very good at it. So seller would be the business or firm. And when we're talking about this is the market, essentially. You have two sides of it, right? And we can very narrowly define this, and we could say that we're talking about the market for Mr. Kemper's demand for tacos every day. And what we would be talking about in that particular instance is the buyer, Mr. Kemper, Professor Kemper, and the amount of tacos that he wants to buy at businesses that are selling tacos every day. So you have this seller, which is the business selling tacos, and Mr. Kemper, the buyer, consumer. We can define it also very broadly. Instead of narrowly defined, we can have many, many buyers and many, many sellers. For example, we could be talking about the gasoline purchased in the United States every day. And that would be all consumers that are buying gas in the United States at a gas station, all the gas stations that exist selling gasoline to consumers. Either case, you still have those two sides. Now, it's very important to understand those two sides when we start off, because that'll help you understand which side gets affected, the consumer or the business, essentially. Okay, let me go ahead and erase those and start drawing our graphs. Almost had it. Okay, so let's say that I'm going to graph the market for gasoline in Lubbock, Texas every day. So I'm going to put gallons of gas in Lubbock. I'm going to just put LBK daily. So this is the market for gasoline. Now, let's just show and illustrate what a simple supply and demand graph would look like. So you have supply curves and you have demand curves. The supply curve is going to slope up, and the reason being is that there's a positive relationship between price and quantity supply. Now, everything is going to be in relationship to price and quantity. I should have highlighted that a little bit more at the first, but this y-axis, P, represents price. The q-axis represents Q for quantity. Everything is going to be in relationship to that, and you will always have these graphs whether you're a sophomore economics student or a PhD student. You always have these set up the same way, with price being on the y-axis and Q, quantity, being on the x-axis. All right, so there's a positive relationship between price and quantity supplied, and that's because as the business produces more, as a business is able to charge a higher price, they want to produce more. Their goal is to maximize profit. So as that price goes up, they want to produce more. On the flip side, though, there is a negative relationship between price and quantity demanded. And this is the consumer side. Demand represents the consumer side. And that makes sense. As that price goes up, I want to purchase less. But if the price keeps going down further and further and further, I will want to purchase as much as possible up until my budget constraint hits the point I can't buy any more, essentially, or I don't have any reason to buy any more. Willingness and able to pay is your demand curve. That's a term you're going to learn this week as well. But demand, there's a negative relationship between price and quantity demanded. So anytime there's a market equilibrium, which we would have here, then that is the market price. And that's a good free market system. This is the price that these businesses should charge. I'm going to put a star there representing that it's equilibrium. And this is the quantity supplied, essentially. Quantity demand and quantity supplied equal each other out. So this is a quantity that needs to exist in this market equilibrium, where profit and utility are maximized. We're as efficient as we possibly can be. And everything is good, right? The businesses that can't produce at this particular level will go out of business, but that's okay. That's how markets should work. And businesses that charge too much, we're going to show you that in just a second, will actually have inefficiency. So let's say that you were one of these businesses and you charged a price above the market equilibrium. You set the price at P2. Well, if you set that price at P2 and there's no rationale to raise it, then you're not going to be at an equilibrium point. Erase that. You're going to hit your supply and demand curves not at equilibrium, which in turn, when you look at the Q axis, gives you two different quantities. I'm going to put the Q2 here, and once again, I apologize for my bad handwriting. I'm going to put Q3 here, and what you can see is that there's a distance between these 2 points, Q2 and Q3. Well, that represents our excess, and it could either be excess supply or excess demand. Now, an easy way to see this is to see what went further. Well, we hit this demand curve right there first. So we hit the consumer side first of the graph. Then we hit this business side, the supply curve. So we have excess supply, whichever one goes further. And if you think of it, if we were to look down at the bottom, Q3 represents the business, how much was produced. Q2 represents how much consumers demanded at that particular price. So Q3 is the further one. Well, that's the supply curve. So excess supply. There's more supply available. They produced way more than what we wanted as consumers. All right. Let's say, though, they, for no reason at all, wanted to lower the price. Well, what would that look like? Well, in that particular instance, that would look like if you lower the price, P2, same thing, there's no reason to. We don't hit the market equilibrium, except this time we're hitting different points on the supply and demand curve. And our Q2 now, that's neat sometimes, Q2 and Q3 represent different points. So Q2 now hits the supply curve, Q3 hits the demand curve. We still have this inefficiency, and this is going to be our excess, if I can write. Demand, our excess demand. The reason being demand went further along than supply. We have more demand. An amount of Q2 was supplied, whereas consumers only demanded an amount. So, or actually demanded way more than Q2. What does this look like in real life? Well, it looks like people standing in line waiting to get gasoline. All right, now that we have that, let's look at some outside factors. Now remember, this was no reason at all for them to change the price. What if, though, instead of lowering or raising the price just because there's an actual factor influencing demand or supply? Well, let's draw our graph again. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger this time. Price, quantity, I'm going to just put gas in Lubbock daily. You all know what I mean. All right, so we have a positive relationship between price and quantity supplied, so that slopes up, S1. We have our demand curve, which slopes down. I'll try to clean it up just a little. And we have that equilibrium point. This is where profit and utility are maximized. We've gotten as much out of the market as possible, P1 star, Q1 star. Sometimes I write nice enough that it notices. Most of the time it doesn't. That's okay. Anyway, let's say, though, there was a hurricane, and the hurricane affected the Houston area. And in the Houston area, there's a lot of oil that's refined and made into gasoline. And because of this, what happened was there wasn't as much gas available for consumers to buy and purchase in Lubbock. Well, here's an easy way to figure out what you're shifting, either the supply and demand curve. And to think about it this way, what got affected? Well, in this particular case, the supply got affected, right? The business side got affected. And so what that would look like is a supply either decreasing or increasing. And in this case, the supply decreased. Now, because we're going to be going along the Q axis, that Q right there, we're going to be going left and right because it is the X axis. And you decrease to the left and increase to the right. So if my supply curve is decreasing, I just pick a place to the left and draw a new supply curve, S2, which would in turn mean that I have a new market equilibrium. Now, the reason why it's a brand new curve and a brand new market equilibrium is the fact that there's an outside force that actually changed these variables, right? The demand didn't change. It wasn't like consumers in Lubbock just said, because, there's a hurricane, we want to buy more gas. No, what actually happened in this particular instance is your supply decreased, which led to a decrease in quantity supplied, but an increase in the price. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Essentially what you're doing is supply decreases, your price in turn goes up, and your quantity. Now let's actually draw the graph again, but in this particular, shift our demand curve. What would it look like if demand shifted? Almost. Third time's a charm. I'm still getting used to this a year into the pandemic, or a year and a half into the pandemic. We're still learning how to use technology, but hey, we're getting better. All right, so let's draw that same thing again, but let's change it a little bit. Okay, so we've got price, we've got quantity, we've got gas, Lubbock, daily, and we've got our supply curve, which slopes up. Positive relationship between price and quantity supplied, S1. Demand slopes down. Negative relationship between price and quantity demanded. It slopes down. We've got our equilibrium price, P1 star, and our quantity, Q1 star. That's the only one that works, Q. Oh, so let's say though, for example, that we're coming up in summer, and all of a sudden there's a lot of people that like to take their vacations in summer, and they like to travel. And when they travel, what happens to the demand? Well, that increases, right? Who gets affected essentially when you travel? It's not like businesses all of a sudden say, hey, let's produce more oil. What happens is the consumer is the one who wants to change their behavior, or they're the one that has a preference, outside factor. Well, if that's going to be the consumer affected, then that's the demand curve, right? Demand. And is it an increase or decrease? Well, do we want more of the product or less of the product? Well, it's an increase. And remember, I said we're going along this Q-axis. We're either going to increase to the right or decrease to the left. Since we're increasing, we just shift that demand curve, D2, to the right. And when you draw that demand curve to the right, what you'll notice is that this results actually in an increase in both the price and quantity. Q2. There you go. So we got an increase in price and we got an increase in quantity. So demand results in quantity increasing. And let me see if I can make that price. Nope, it did not make it look pretty. Demand increasing, quantity is going to increase, price is going to increase. Here's something that will help you too. If demand decreases, it's going to shift to the left. Quantity is also going to go in the same way. Very weird that this is how my computer reacts to me drawing Q's only. And price is going to decrease. Whereas supply, the reason being is there's a positive relationship. Price is going to be a little bit different, the way it interacts. Increase in supply actually shifts. Quantity decreases because the curve shifts left, and price increases. Supply, oh, I got that wrong. By the way, I wasn't even paying attention. This should be actually decreasing leads to quantity decreasing and price increasing. We're shifting to the left there. If supply increases, then quantity, on the other hand, would increase, but our price would. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to give you all some practice problems, and hopefully that'll help you understand it. Now, let me just show you some things real quickly, how we can graph this and show what happens. Oh, man, technology. All right, let's say that there's a pandemic, and we're just going to put household goods up here, the market for household goods. What happens is that during the first of the pandemic, everything shuts down, and what happened was a lot of people were worried that they wouldn't have very much toilet paper. So you saw demand increase for toilet paper, which led to an increase of price. Put this here, P1 star, P2 star, right? Everybody's going and getting more toilet paper. That should increase the price up for that. Star, Q2 star. The problem is they couldn't make the toilet paper very quickly, plus everything was shut down. So you had a supply shift as well. Everything shut down, S2. And what happened was really quickly that price of toilet paper went way up, right, to P3. Y'all can see that. That's just a quick example of how I can graph something in real time. I could do the same thing if I were talking about cars. People stopped buying cars, so demand shifted to the left. And what happened was the price of cars actually went down. And there were too many cars. That was one thing that, for the most part, we could keep making, and there were a lot of used cars available. Well, the problem was at a certain point, it kept up with that production. Then we stopped making them completely, and there were no used cars available. And we got stimulus and it increased our income, which means that our demand increased. People are going out more because of vaccines, etc. And fast forward to the summer, that supply decreases for cars because we've had so much time of not producing cars. And then we had a huge increase in demand. You're going to have inflation. I could graph all that. I know I went through that one quick, but I could graph that if I wanted to, and it would come out looking kind of nice. Anyways, I hope that this was beneficial. If you have any questions, please email me. Have a great week. Wreck 'em and go Broncos.